Hello, YouTube viewers. This is Blake Fan, and listen. As you know, the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer is getting ready to come on. I'm going to be recording that for you to show you how soon the Lord's return could be. But first, real quickly, here's Matthew 20:24, so you can see what the Bible says about the Lord's return. Thank you.
Chapter 24. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he told them, "Do you see all these buildings? I assure you they will be so completely demolished that not one stone will be left on top of another." Later, Jesus sat on the slopes of the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and asked,
"When will all this take place? And will there be any sign ahead of time to signal your return and the end of the world?"
Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name saying, 'I am the Messiah.' They will lead many astray, and wars will break out near and far, but don't panic. Yes, these things must come, but the end won't follow immediately. The nations and kingdoms will proclaim war against each other, and there will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all this will be only the beginning of the horrors to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because of your allegiance to me. And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will lead many people astray. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But those who endure to the end will be saved. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world, so that all nations will hear it. And then, finally, the end will come. The time will come when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Reader, pay attention. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person outside the house must not go inside to pack. A person in the field must not return even to get a coat. How terrible it will be for pregnant women and for mothers nursing their babies in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath, for that will be a time of greater horror than anything the world has ever seen or will ever see again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, the entire human race will be destroyed, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. Then if anyone tells you, 'Look, here is the Messiah,' or 'There he is,' don't pay any attention. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and perform great miraculous signs and wonders, so as to deceive, if possible, even God's chosen ones. See, I have warned you. So if someone tells you, 'Look, the Messiah is out in the desert,' don't bother to go and look. Or, 'Look, he is hiding here,' don't believe it. For as the lightning lights up the entire sky, so it will be when the Son of Man comes. Just as the gathering of vultures shows there is a carcass nearby, so these signs indicate that the end is near. Immediately after those horrible days end, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. And then at last, the sign of the coming of the Son of Man will appear in the heavens, and there will be deep mourning among all the nations of the earth. And they will see the Son of Man arrive on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send forth his angels with the sound of a mighty trumpet blast, and they will gather together his chosen ones from the farthest ends of the earth and heaven. Now learn a lesson from the fig tree. When its buds become tender and its leaves begin to sprout, you know, without being told, that summer is near. Just so, when you see the events I've described beginning to happen, you can know his return is very near, right at the door. I assure you, this generation will not pass from the scene before all these things take place. Heaven and earth will disappear, but my words will remain forever. However, no one knows the day or the hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself. Only the Father knows. When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize is what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. That is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. 2 men will be working together in the field. One will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding flour at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. So be prepared, because you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Know this: a homeowner who knew exactly when a burglar was coming would stay alert and not permit the house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. Who
Okay.
is a faithful, sensible servant to whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his household and feeding his family? If the master returns,
Okay, that's not all. That's only part of Matthew 24. But now let's join the situation
any
room
evidence
already
Brennan
in
misused
progress.
his intelligence access or monetized his proximity to it. Asked if this is tied directly to his criticism of Trump, Sarah Sanders said this.
Not at all. The president has a constitutional responsibility to protect classified information and who has access to it.
Yet the White House is also reviewing clearances for 9 other Democratic officials who have criticized the president, including
James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr.
one name not on that list, former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his communications with Russian officials. Yet the president never revoked his clearance. Asked why he's not on that list, the White House deflecting today.
Again, certainly we would look at those if we deemed it necessary, and we'll keep you posted if that list gets updated.
The president's statement on clearances dated July 26th, nearly 3 weeks ago. But it was just announced today as the White House struggles to defend itself from a crisis of its own making. The fallout from former staffer Omarosa Manigault Newman's tell-all book. The president remaining behind closed doors today as he lashed out at the special counsel on Twitter, calling the investigation a rigged Russian witch hunt with no credibility. That, as his lawyer Rudy Giuliani argues, the facts are up to them.
In the eye of the beholder. No, facts are not in the eye of the
Yes,
beholder.
it is.
You're always welcome here to
Nowadays
argue
they
the
are.
case.
Now, John Brennan has responded, Jim, saying that he believes this is directly tied to his criticism of President Trump. He says it won't deter him going forward, but he does fear that this is sending a message to those who have their security clearances that they ought to hold their tongues. Jim?
That's the one thing all the people on that list have in common. They have criticized this president. Caitlin Collins at the White House, thanks very much. Let's go in depth now with CNN crime and justice reporter Shimon Prokupecz, as well as CNN law enforcement analyst Josh Campbell. He is a former FBI supervisory special agent. Shimon, the director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, I'm told, was not consulted on this decision. I'm also told that the CIA was, in the words of an official with knowledge, caught off guard by this decision. Has this ever happened before? A president revoking a senior official's security clearance and threatening to do that to others?
No, not that we know of, and certainly this seems to be unprecedented. It appears, by all accounts, you've talked to people, I've talked to people, I've spoken to a national security lawyer who really says that there's really no reason, no cause here. You would need cause to revoke someone's security clearance, and to take such a step, right, you'd have to show, did the person leak classified information? Is the person under some kind of investigation, criminal, or perhaps an internal investigation? And really we have nothing to suggest any of this, certainly by the former CIA director. So it is unprecedented. It is unprecedented for the White House to meddle in this, to go ahead and make decisions again for the sponsoring agency, who here probably was the CIA, to circumvent the CIA, to go ahead and just do this unilaterally on their own and from the podium, right? Nonetheless, before the American public, before the people there who watch these briefings, to do this in this fashion, certainly unprecedented, Jim.
Josh, let's talk about the timing of this, because not only does this happen when the White House is within something of a controversy with the former aide Omarosa, but also exactly one day after John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, criticized President Trump in a tweet. I'm going to read that tweet now. He said the following: "It's astounding how often you fail to live up to minimum standards of decency, civility, and probity." This is him addressing the president. "Seems like you will never understand what it means to be president, nor what it takes to be a good, decent, and honest person. so disheartening, so dangerous for our nation. Is it a stretch to imagine, Josh Campbell, that this was political punishment for criticism like that?
Not at all. I think that definitely factors into play here. I think there are three issues that are all happening at the same time. First of all, there's this issue of distraction. Now, you think about some of the other major issues that are taking place right now. You have the Paul Manafort trial, the president's former campaign aide who's being prosecuted. You have the Omarosa revelations. We've been talking the last couple of days about these racial epithets possibly the president's been accused of uttering. And this is all an attempt to distract that. I'm convinced that there is a running list inside the White House of topics that they can pull from whenever they need to try to distract. The second issue comes down to the tweet that you just mentioned. I think it's an issue of impulse. Now, this is a president who, he gets some type of cathartic release by going after his enemies. I'm sure he saw that tweet and was very angry by striking back. This is payback for Brennan for that. But then the last issue, I think, if you look at the collection of these officials that have been targeted, it's the idea that this is another instance of trying to discredit this ongoing investigation into Russian interference, because many of these people had a role either in the investigation or in calling out that Russian interference. And now tying in this, specifically Bruce Orr, Justice Department official, who I don't think has criticized the president, but was involved up in that orbit, just kind of shows what it's all about here. I think that at the end of the day, the motives here are sinister, they're selfish, but they're going to have serious implications for U.S. national security.
One of the things they disagreed with this president on is the assessment of the intelligence community that Russia unequivocally interfered in the election. Clapper, Brennan, and others. That's just one of many points of contention. Shimon, we did the math here on this long list of people targeted now. Nearly 300 years of experience in government, some 268 years of national security experience. You look at a James Clapper there, 47 years going back to the Vietnam War. Michael Hayden, nearly 40 years. John Brennan was in the CIA for 25 years. Is this consequential for the intelligence community for them to lose this eligibility for access?
Well, certainly it is, Jim, because when you think about it, what if the current CIA director wants to call John Brennan and say, hey, you were dealing with an issue while you were CIA director, and I need to talk to you about this. And it's a classified matter, a secret matter. He now cannot talk to her about that matter. In the case of the former DNI director, James Clapper, he said on our air around 3 o'clock was that, he has talked to former White House officials. This now does not essentially allow these people, in the case of certainly the former CIA director, John Brennan, to have the classified, secret conversations with current officials. They may want to bring him in for his expertise on any number of issues. So that's where the consequence could be in terms of on a national security level, certainly in the current administration.
You know what John Brennan was in charge of, by the way, just a reminder, he was the point man on Osama bin Laden at the time when he was killed in an operation, experience that might be valuable in the war on terrorism. Imagine that. Josh, what kind of signal does this send to those former officials or current officials who stand up and criticize this administration or the president or its policies? Is this intended to silence them?
It possibly is intended. I know it's certainly a byproduct, this chilling effect that is now going to go out to anyone who may be in a position of wanting to speak out to criticize what they are seeing in this administration. But I can tell you what, you look at the caliber of these people, these individuals who have dedicated much of their career and their lives to public service. I don't agree with everything that they've said. I don't agree with some of the language that's been used to criticize the president. But I know to a person, these are patriots. And I know that there are a lot more like them that are in government. They may, the intention here may be to try to deter them from speaking out, but that's not going to stop good people from standing up whenever they sense wrongdoing and pointing it out.
And we got to remind people, these folks, they have served Republican and Democratic presidents multiple times. It's not an issue of politics in their career. They've served both Republicans and Democrats. Shimon Prokupecz, Josh Campbell, thanks very much. We're joined now by Congressman Don Byers, a Democrat from the great state of Virginia, also former Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, I should mention. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
It bears repeating, you tweeted after this came out today, very strong words about this decision. I'll just repeat it for the sake of our audience. You said, quote, Trump is clearly punishing John Brennan for criticizing him, cracking down on a dissent, and retaliating against a private citizen's free speech. The president has adopted the weak, paranoid, authoritarian behavior of a dictator. Those are strong words. Those are remarkable words.
But it's also very clear. I mean, this is a striking move towards authoritarianism. This is what dictators do. They shut down the press. They shut down dissent. They jail their opponents. or in this case, they steal their security clearance. And it's mean, it's petty, and it's ironic.